My name is Elena Harper. I'm 32 years old now. I own a successful international logistics company. I sit across polished conference tables from men who once would have dismissed me as just a quiet girl. I sign contracts worth millions. But when I was 14, I didn't even know my mother's phone number by heart. And that's the kind of detail that tells you everything about a child's place in her family. My father died when I was 6 years old. Heart attack. Sudden. Brutal. Unfair. 1 minute he was lifting me onto his shoulders in the backyard. The next minute he was gone. My older brother, Caleb, was 9 at the time. That day divided our lives into before and after. Before, we were a loud, messy, warm family. After, we became something fragile and unbalanced. My mother, Diane Harper, never truly recovered. She kept moving, kept working, kept cooking dinners and paying bills, but part of her stayed frozen in that hospital hallway. And Caleb became the center of her universe. He cried louder than I did. He broke things when he was angry. He failed tests. He got into fights. So she held him closer. "He's hurting," she would tell me. As if I wasn't. As if grief had chosen him and skipped me. I learned early that I was the strong one. Which really meant I wasn't allowed to fall apart. By the time I was 12, I knew my role. If something went missing, it was my fault. If Caleb snapped at me, I had provoked him. If he shoved me, I should have stayed out of his way. "You're mature for your age, Elena," my mother would say when I didn't argue back. Mature. What a beautiful word for neglected. When I turned 14, something unexpected happened. I got accepted into the National Creative Arts Academy, a prestigious summer and scholarship program for students across the country. Full scholarship. Full ride. My art teacher cried when she handed me the acceptance letter. "You're extraordinary," she whispered. No one had ever used that word for me before. At dinner that night, I told my mother. She blinked. "That's nice," she said. Caleb laughed. "Art," he said. "So you're going to draw pictures for a living?" "It's a scholarship," I said quietly. He rolled his eyes. "Whatever. Don't get arrogant." And just like that, the moment shrank. The letter went into my bedroom drawer. And life went back to orbiting Caleb. That summer, my mother won a hospital raffle prize, a fully paid vacation to Thailand. Round-trip flights. Luxury hotel. 5-star package. For the first time in years, she looked excited about something. "We deserve this," she said. Caleb immediately began researching beaches and nightlife. No one asked what I wanted to see. I told myself that didn't matter. At least we were going together. At least we were still a family. A week before the trip, I overheard something strange. Caleb was on the phone in his room. His voice was low, urgent. "The trust fund," he said. "It'll be easier than you think." I paused in the hallway. Trust fund. I didn't know we had one. Then I heard my name. If she's out of the picture, it simplifies everything. My heart stuttered. Before I could process what that meant, the floorboard creaked beneath me. His door flew open. "Were you listening?" he demanded. I was just walking past. He stepped close enough that I could smell mint gum on his breath. "Stay out of things you don't understand." I told myself I must have misheard. I wanted to believe that. Because the alternative was terrifying. The flight to Dubai, our layover before Bangkok, was my first time on a plane. I pressed my forehead to the window and watched cities shrink beneath clouds. For a few hours, suspended above the earth, we felt almost normal. My mother smiled at the in-flight movie. Caleb even made a joke. I let myself relax. Maybe things were changing. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe we were healing. Dubai International Airport felt like another planet. Marble floors. Golden storefronts. Glass elevators. Perfume floating in the air. We had a 6-hour layover. Caleb suggested we split up. "I'll take Mom to look at jewelry," he said. "You check out the bookstore." He held out his hand. "Give me your backpack. No point carrying it around." Inside that backpack, my passport. My boarding pass. $40 my grandmother had slipped into my hand before we left. I hesitated for half a second. Then I handed it over. He was my brother. I trusted him. 20 minutes later, I returned to the agreed meeting spot. They weren't there. I checked my phone. No messages. I walked to the jewelry store. They weren't inside. I waited. 30 minutes passed. Then 45. My chest began to tighten. I hurried to the flight information board. Boarding had begun. My heart slammed. I ran to the gate. The line was gone. The doors were closed. I approached the airline desk. "My family is on that flight," I said, breathless. "I need to board." The woman looked at her screen. "What's your passport number?" "My brother has it." She frowned. "And your boarding pass?" "He has that too." She typed for a moment. Then looked up at me with something that wasn't quite pity. "Your mother and brother have boarded." The words felt unreal. "I haven't." Silence. The plane began moving outside the window. I watched it taxi toward the runway. Watched it shrink. Watched it leave. And slowly, the truth settled over me like cold water. They hadn't forgotten me. They had chosen not to look for me. Security escorted me to an office. They asked questions. I didn't have answers. They tried calling my mother. Her phone was off. Airplane mode. I didn't know her number by memory. Isn't that pathetic? 14 years old and unable to dial your own mother without a contact list. They released me back into the terminal while authorities investigated. I slid down against a marble wall near a cafe and pulled my knees to my chest. People walked past me carrying designer bags and laughing. No one noticed the girl who had just been erased. And then a voice spoke gently. "Are you alone?" I looked up. He was tall, wearing a white kandura, his beard touched with grey. His eyes were steady, not invasive, not suspicious. Just concerned. "My name is Farid Al-Mansouri," he said. "I work with airport operations." I wiped my face quickly. "I'm fine." "You are not," he said softly. And something in me cracked. I told him everything. The scholarship. The phone call. The backpack. The trust fund. The boarding. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he stood slowly. "This was intentional," he said quietly. My stomach dropped. He extended his hand. "Come with me. Trust me. We will find the truth." And for the first time that day, I didn't feel invisible. Farid didn't rush me. He walked beside me, not ahead, not behind, as if I were someone important. Someone worth matching pace with. That small detail meant more than he could have known. We entered a secure operations office behind a frosted glass door. Inside, the air felt cooler, quieter. Screens lined the walls, each one showing different corners of the airport: gates, terminals, escalators, check-in counters. It felt strange knowing that somewhere inside this maze of cameras was proof of what had happened to me. Or proof that I was wrong. Part of me still hoped I was wrong. Farid spoke to a woman in uniform in Arabic. She nodded, typed something, then glanced at me with curiosity and sympathy. "Tell me exactly where you left your brother," Farid said gently. "Near the bookstore. Across from a gold jewelry store." He nodded and began scanning through timestamps. The footage rewound. Fast-forwarded. Stopped. Rewound again. And then, there we were. On the screen. Me. Caleb. My mother. Walking together through the terminal. I watched myself laugh at something Caleb said. That hurt the most. I had been happy. The footage continued. I saw myself turning toward the restroom corridor. Caleb holding my backpack. He waited a few seconds. Then looked around. My heart started pounding. He stepped behind a pillar. Unzipped my bag. Removed my passport. Removed my boarding pass. He slid them into his jacket pocket. Then zipped the bag closed. Calm. Efficient. Practiced. I felt the air leave my lungs. No, I whispered. But the screen didn't lie. He walked to my mother. Showed her something on his phone. She frowned, confused. He leaned closer, speaking quickly. Her shoulders sagged. Then, they walked away. Together. Not searching. Not looking back. Just leaving. I pressed my hand to my mouth to stop myself from making a sound. Farid didn't speak for a long moment. When he finally did, his voice was firm. This was planned. The word sliced through me. Planned. Not an accident. Not chaos. Not a misunderstanding. A choice. Can we see the phone footage? Farid asked the operations officer. Within minutes, they had cross-referenced camera angles and security monitoring that flagged unusual behavior, including someone manipulating travel documents. Caleb had texted someone while waiting near the gate. Authorities pulled metadata tied to his device. Because we were international travelers, this crossed into legal territory quickly. Farid looked at me before the messages were displayed. You may not want to see this. I do, I said. My voice surprised even me. The messages appeared. Caleb. She doesn't know about Dad's trust. Unknown contact. Are you sure this works? Caleb. Mom always believes me. I'll say she wandered off. She's dramatic anyway. Unknown contact. And the money. Caleb. Once she looks unstable or disappears long enough, it's easier to challenge her share. Unknown contact. You're cold. Caleb. I'm practical. My knees nearly buckled. Farid guided me to a chair. The room felt smaller now. The marble floors outside. The luxury stores. The perfume in the air. All of it felt fake. Because underneath it, my brother had tried to erase me. Not just from a vacation. From existence. Farid explained what I didn't know. My father had left behind $600,000 in life insurance and investments. Split evenly. $300,000 for Caleb at age 18. $300,000 for me, protected until I turned 25, specifically for education or business. Caleb had just turned 17. He would gain access to his portion in 1 year. But he had likely realized something. If I were declared missing, or mentally unstable, or legally estranged, there could be grounds to contest my portion. Especially if my mother sided with him. And she always sided with him. He hadn't just wanted a vacation without me. He wanted my future. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely steady. Farid looked at the security officer. This is criminal, he said calmly. Tampering with travel documents. Abandonment of a minor. Attempted financial manipulation. Because the flight was international, authorities in Bangkok were alerted before the plane even landed. Thai airport police were waiting at the arrival gate. I didn't see it in person. But they allowed me to watch through a secure video link. Passengers exited the plane one by one. Tourists stretching. Couples smiling. Children holding stuffed animals. Then I saw them. My mother. Caleb. They looked relaxed. Until uniformed officers approached. My mother looked confused at first. Caleb tried to laugh. I watched an officer show them printed still images from the footage. Caleb's face drained of color. My mother looked at him. Then back at the photo. Then at him again. And in that moment, I saw something shift in her expression. Doubt. Real doubt. Maybe for the first time in years. They were escorted away for questioning. Within hours, my mother's phone turned back on. She had dozens of missed calls. From the airline. From airport authorities. From numbers she didn't recognize. And finally, from me. She called. I stared at the phone. My hands trembled. Farid nodded gently. "It is your choice," he said. I answered. "Elena," her voice cracked. "I'm here," I said. "Oh my God, we thought you," Caleb said. "You." I saw the footage. Silence. Long heavy silence. "He said you wandered off," she whispered. "I didn't." More silence. "They showed me the messages," I continued. Another silence. Then something I had never heard from her before. A small, broken sound. Like something inside her collapsing. "I didn't know," she said. "I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I just said the one truth that had lived in me for years. You never do." And for once, she didn't argue. Caleb was detained temporarily in Bangkok. Because he was still a minor, the legal consequences were complicated but serious. Tampering with documents. Endangering a minor. Fraud intent. The charges would follow him home. My mother chose to return immediately to Dubai under supervision. She wasn't arrested, but she was investigated for negligence. I stayed in Dubai overnight under embassy protection. In a hotel suite bigger than our entire house back home. It felt unreal. Farid arranged everything. Before he left that night, he paused by the door. "You are not invisible," he said quietly. And I believed him. For the first time in my life. I believed it. The next morning, I faced my mother in person. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically. Emotionally. Caleb stood beside her, silent for once. No charm. No confidence. Just anger simmering under humiliation. My mother tried to hug me. I stepped back. Not out of cruelty. But because something inside me had shifted. "You left me," I said. "I believed him," she whispered. "That's the problem." She started crying. And suddenly, I wasn't the quiet one anymore. "I heard him on the phone last week," I said. "About the trust fund." Caleb's head snapped toward me. "You were spying." "I was walking past," I said calmly. "Like I always am. Just background noise, right?" He looked away. Guilt flickered. Then defensiveness. "You're overreacting." "No," I said. "I'm finally reacting." And the room went silent. The flight back to the United States felt nothing like the one that had brought us to Dubai. On the way there, I had watched clouds and imagined beaches. On the way back, I stared at my reflection in the dark airplane window and saw someone older than 14. Not wiser. Not stronger. Just awake. Caleb sat across the aisle under supervision. He didn't look at me. His jaw stayed tight the entire flight. Every now and then he would glance at Mom, like he was waiting for her to defend him. She didn't. For once, she was silent. And that silence said more than any argument ever had. When we landed in Phoenix, things moved quickly. Because the incident involved international airspace, federal authorities were involved. Statements were taken. Reports were filed. Lawyers were contacted. I had to sit in a small beige office and repeat the story again. Yes, I handed him my backpack. No, I didn't give him permission to remove my passport. Yes, I believed he would come back for me. Each answer felt like peeling off skin. Caleb's lawyer argued that he was a misguided minor and that there was no proof of malicious intent. But there was proof. Screenshots. Security footage. Messages. Intent doesn't hide well when written down. Because Caleb was 17, he wasn't tried as an adult. But the charges were serious enough to leave a mark. Probation. Mandatory counseling. Community service. A record that would complicate scholarships and certain universities. He lost his early football recruitment offers within weeks. Colleges don't like scandal. At home, the atmosphere changed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being blamed. And that felt strange. I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. A week after we returned, my grandmother asked me to come to her house. Grandma Ruth had always been my quiet protector. She never interfered loudly, but she saw things. She made tea and sat me at her small kitchen table, the same table where I used to color while Dad read the newspaper. "There's something you deserve to know," she said. She opened a folder. Inside were legal documents. My father's will. I had never seen it before. "He set this up months before he passed," Grandma said softly. "He had concerns." "Concerns about what?" I asked. She hesitated. "About Caleb's behavior. Even at 9, your father noticed manipulation. He worried what it might become if not corrected." My chest tightened. Dad had seen it. He had known. The trust was divided evenly, $300,000 each. Caleb's accessible at 18. Mine protected until 25 unless used for accredited education or business plans reviewed by trustees. "You were always careful with money," Grandma said. "Your father admired that. He wanted to make sure your share couldn't be pressured away." I swallowed. So Caleb wasn't guessing. He knew. Somehow, he had learned the structure. And instead of waiting, instead of working for his own future, he tried to take mine. Grandma slid one final envelope across the table. My name was written in familiar handwriting. Elena. My hands started shaking before I even opened it. "This was meant for you when you turned 18, Grandma said. But I think you need it now." I unfolded the paper carefully. The ink had faded slightly with time. "My sweet Elena. If you are reading this, it means I am not there to say these things myself. You have always been my quiet strength. The world may overlook you at times, but I never have. You observe before speaking. You think before acting. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. I worry about your brother. He loves fiercely but fears deeply. Fear can twist people if left unchecked. Promise me you will never shrink yourself to make others comfortable. Your light does not need permission to shine. I have protected your future as best as I can. One day, I hope you use it not just to survive, but to build something that makes you proud. Love always. Dad." By the time I reached the last line, I couldn't see the page anymore. He had seen me. All along. All those years I thought I was background noise. I pressed the letter to my chest and cried, not the quiet, hidden crying I was used to, but loud, shaking sobs that felt like they were clearing out years of swallowed hurt. Grandma held me. "You were never invisible," she whispered. And for the first time, I believed it. Things didn't magically become perfect at home. Caleb oscillated between anger and silence. Sometimes he'd glare at me like I'd ruined his life. Sometimes he'd avoid me completely. But something fundamental had changed. Mom started therapy. Real therapy. Not the kind where you attend 2 sessions and quit. She began asking me questions. How did you feel growing up? When did you start feeling second? They were hard conversations. Sometimes messy. Sometimes defensive. But honest. And honesty was new. One night, she sat at the edge of my bed. "I failed you," she said quietly. I stared at her, unsure what to do with that sentence. "I thought protecting Caleb meant balancing him," she continued. "I didn't realize I was sacrificing you. I didn't hug her. Not yet. But I nodded. Because acknowledgement was the first brick in rebuilding something broken. School started again that fall. Rumors spread quickly. Everyone knew something had happened overseas, but details were private. I expected whispers. Judgment. Instead, something surprising happened. People treated me differently. Not with pity. With respect. My art teacher pulled me aside. You look different, she said gently. I feel different, I admitted. Because I was. I no longer felt like someone waiting to be chosen. I felt like someone choosing herself. I applied myself harder than ever. Every brushstroke carried emotion. Every sketch carried defiance. I wasn't creating to impress anymore. I was creating to express. And that changed everything. Caleb left for college a year later, a smaller school than he'd once aimed for. We barely spoke. At family gatherings, our conversations were polite but shallow. How's school? Fine. How's art? Good. There was no apology. Not a real one. He once muttered, I didn't think it would go that far. But that wasn't remorse. That was regret over getting caught. And I learned something important. Forgiveness doesn't require trust. I could let go of hatred without letting him close again. That boundary protected me. When I turned 18, I reread Dad's letter. Especially this line. Use it not just to survive, but to build something that makes you proud. Build. The word stuck with me. I didn't just want to attend art school. I wanted independence. I wanted power over my own future. I became fascinated with international trade, how goods move across borders, how markets connect cultures. Dubai stayed in my mind. The marble floors. The gold shops. The airport where everything fell apart and everything began. I researched import-export businesses. Learned about logistics. Customs laws. Shipping regulations. It wasn't glamorous. But it was strategic. And strategy felt like armor. On my 17th birthday, I received an email. Subject line, checking on you. It was from Farid. He wrote simply, I hope you are strong. I hope you remember that one act against you does not define you. You define yourself. I smiled through tears. Sometimes family is blood. Sometimes family is a stranger who sits beside you when the world turns cold. I kept Dad's letter in my desk drawer. Not hidden. Not forgotten. A reminder. I wasn't the extra one. I wasn't the afterthought. I was protected. Seen. Valued. And one day, I would build something so solid that no one could ever try to erase me again. When I turned 18, I didn't feel older. I felt aware. The trustees overseeing my father's will met with me and explained my options. I could access part of the money early for education. Most people expected I'd choose art school. But something inside me had shifted since Dubai. Art was still my soul. But business felt like protection. I enrolled in a university with a strong international business and logistics program. I studied supply chains, customs law, global trade routes. While other students complained about spreadsheets, I leaned into them. Because I understood something they didn't. Control over movement means control over power. And I would never again let someone control my movement. Caleb came home during his second year of college. He knocked on my bedroom door. I didn't think they'd actually arrest me, he said quietly. That's what happens when you commit a crime. He flinched. For once, he wasn't defensive. He looked tired. I was angry, he admitted. Dad always favored you. I stared at him. He protected me, I said calmly. That's not the same thing. He didn't argue. That conversation didn't fix us. But it shifted something. He stopped seeing me as weak. And I stopped needing him to understand me. At 21, I applied for an international internship program. When the acceptance email arrived, I cried. Placement, Dubai. The same airport. The same city. But this time, I wasn't abandoned. I was arriving by choice. When I landed, I stood still for a moment inside the terminal. The marble floors gleamed the same way they had years ago. But I didn't feel small anymore. I felt steady. Farid met me for coffee. He looked older, more silver in his beard, but his eyes were just as kind. You returned, he said, smiling. I needed to, I replied. We talked for hours. He told me about trade expansion across the Middle East. About artisan exporters struggling to reach Western markets. That conversation planted a seed. By 25, my trust fund was fully accessible. I didn't buy a house. I didn't buy a car. I started a company. A logistics and import business connecting small Middle Eastern artisans with American retailers. Hand-woven rugs. Ceramics. Textiles. Jewelry. I remembered the gold shops in Dubai, how out of place I'd felt. Now I was negotiating contracts inside them. My first year was brutal. Long nights. Lost shipments. Customs delays. Financial risk. But every time I wanted to quit, I remembered being 14 on a marble floor. Powerless. This business was proof I wasn't anymore. When I was 27, Caleb asked to meet me for coffee. Not at home. Not at a family dinner. Neutral ground. I've been in therapy, he said awkwardly. Real therapy. I listened. I was jealous, he admitted. You didn't react. You didn't explode. You were always calm. Dad trusted you. That made me feel smaller. It was the first honest thing he'd ever said to me. I'm sorry, he finished. Not for getting caught. Not for consequences. For what he did. The apology didn't erase the past. But it closed something that had been open for years. I forgive you, I said. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant I was done carrying the weight. My company became profitable in year 3. By year 5, we expanded into Europe. One evening, my mother visited my office. She walked past framed trade certificates and product samples displayed on shelves. You built all this? She asked softly. Yes. She looked at me differently that day. Not as the quiet daughter. Not as the strong one who could handle it. But as someone capable. I'm proud of you, she said. The words landed gently. I didn't need them the way I once had. But they still mattered. Last year, I stood in Dubai International Airport again. Not lost. Not crying. Not waiting for someone to return. I was there closing a distribution deal. As I walked through the terminal, I passed the cafe where I once sat on the floor with my knees pulled to my chest. I stopped for a moment. 14-year-old me had thought she was abandoned because she wasn't enough. 32-year-old me knows the truth. I wasn't left behind because I was weak. I was left behind because someone else was afraid. And fear makes people cruel. But being abandoned forced me to grow. It forced my mother to confront her blindness. It forced Caleb to confront himself. And it forced me to stop shrinking. If that plane hadn't taken off without me, I might have spent my life trying to be chosen. Instead, I chose myself. And that changed everything.